Well, Magali, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining this interview. And first of all, a happy new year. I hope, although I think that the year was already very good for you, 2020. Let's hope that it is even better 2021. Maybe as an introduction, we had the GUBERNA Alumni event, and we had a very interesting panel on sustainable finance and sustainable business. You were supposed to participate to that panel. Unfortunately, technology decided differently, so we see that we still can improve there. But we really wanted to follow up with you and take your expert input on this extremely important topic. So thank you very much for being there. Can I ask you maybe to first introduce you? What is your function? What is your background?
Yes, so thank you, Yves, and Happy New Year for you as well. And I'm not sure what to wish for 2021 after the 2020 we had. So, as you said, my name is Magali Anderson. I'm an engineer by trade. I am a French, and I spent the first 37 years of my life working in the oil and gas industry all around the world, in countries such as I was CEO of Angola, I was in Nigeria for some years, China, Indonesia, etc. So I have quite a broad expertise of what's happening around the world. 4 years ago, I joined LafargeHolcim, which is the biggest building material company and mainly making cement and concrete, as the head of health and safety. And then 1 year ago, I switched to Chief Sustainability Officer, part of the executive committee.
Yeah, so you're Chief Sustainability Officer, which is an interesting new type of function that we see appearing. And you're a member of the executive committee of LafargeHolcim. That's quite not usual, I think. What is the scope of that function also towards the business of LafargeHolcim?
I think you're right, it's not very usual. Actually, when I got nominated, I checked and I could only find a handful of companies who had put sustainability clearly at the governance of the company. But my actual opinion is that that's the only place it can be. My role, I think, is actually, let's be very modest here, is to transform the company. And you can only transform it if you are part of the executive committee. You can't do that if you are a function sitting on the side. Because the reality is, if you really want to be serious about sustainability, you have to change your business model. So if I take the example of cement and concrete, for many years, we were driven by volumes. The more you sell, the better. We need to shift from being driven by volumes, from being driven by performance. So it's not, I don't want to sell more concrete, I want to sell better concrete that is more sustainable, but also maybe less in quantity for the same final objects. If I start looking at it that way, this is a very deep transformation on how we think about our business model. And that can only be done if you are part of the executive committee. It can't be done if you are just a PR person of some kind.
Okay, well, let's maybe move to one of the key deliverables of what you're doing. And I think that LafargeHolcim has recently pledged to become a net zero company from a CO2 point of view, based on a roadmap assessed by the SBTi, so the Science Based Targets Initiative. What does that mean precisely? What does that imply precisely? But besides beyond the words, what does that really mean?
Well, I think the big trap that you cannot fall in when you're a company of our size with our challenges is the trap of greenwashing. This is really, words do not mean anything. You have to walk the talk. And for me, we could have signed the business initiative for 1.5 degrees much earlier, because they actually allow you to sign it and come up with an action plan later. That was never an option for me. It was clear that we had to do it a credible way. And if I had to use only one word about what we're doing in sustainability, it would be credibility. Anything we do has to be 100% credible. And the only way to be credible is to show that not only you have an ambition, which is the net zero, but to show that you have intermediate targets that make sense, because you can't be sitting doing nothing and hope that something will happen in 30 years or plus. So you have to have a credible 2030 target, which is a reasonable objective. And the only way to do that, again, is using a third party like Science Based Target Initiative, which is renowned for doing so, and make sure that they approve what you are doing.
So that is the role of the SBTI, is to approve, to review and approve your roadmap?
That's right. So they review your targets. They check that your targets are aligned with your objective, with your long-term objective. And it's a NGO, so that's really their objective is to validate and qualify how serious your ambition is. But what was very interesting when we started is that actually the roadmap did not exist at all. So there was no target. So the first work we had to do was to work with SBTI and say, so what should be the target for 2030 for the cement sector, according to 1.5 degree scenario, or well below 2 degree, because at the start, there is a kind of, the first 10 years are kind of the same. So we had to work with them. And now we are pushing this partnership because we said, okay, fine. So we now have the roadmap for the first 10 years, which was truly my priority because I want my team to start working immediately. And the only way to do that is to have a proper roadmap for the next 10 years. After that, technology will evolve and so on. I think it's a bit ambitious to have a detailed roadmap for 30 years. I mean, I think people who do that are a bit of dreamers, really. So when I discussed with SBTI, what we realized is the roadmap doesn't exist at all. So we actually partner with them to define the roadmap post-2030 together. So I hope there will be, that's why we haven't defined the post-2030 detailed roadmap because it doesn't exist. The requirement of where it should be scientifically doesn't exist. So we are actually partnering with them with SBTI, and it will be our roadmap, of course, but it will be also, maybe it could become a reference for the sector.
And when you're speaking about the roadmap, how should I imagine that? What does that mean, this roadmap? What does it do actually, concretely? So
when you're in a heavy industry, hard to abate sector, as we call them, as we call us, it's to go to zero is a technical challenge. So sometimes I say, I wish I was a office type of company or a bank where I can announce neutrality just by putting some few solar panel on the top of my roof, and then I'm done. Us is extremely technical. So we just need, first we need to see if it's feasible. I mean, if I make concrete that doesn't hold the strengths and the bridge collapse, that's not going to help anybody. If I make concrete that will cost so much that no one will be able to afford a house, or they will be better making it out of gold, that's not helping anybody. So the challenge was to find a way to find the technical solutions to not only do it, but also do it in a financially acceptable manner. Now, the first 10 years are actually, between brackets, easy. Because our challenge on the first 10 years is not so much how we are going to do it. The technical levers we are using are levers that we know quite well. To give a bit of history, we have reduced by 27% our CO2 since 1990, between 1990 and 2019. So we have already done a fair bit of the way. So the first 10 years was quite easy. My challenge in the first 10 years was the scalability. So we are really good in some plants. We know exactly what to do. We now need to do it in our plants in our 75 countries. And as you know, not the incentive are the same depending on the regions, et cetera, et cetera. So it was really more of a deployment and project management challenge more than technical. Post 2030 will be more a technical and innovation challenge and a cost challenge.
Okay. And a slightly different question. You also issued a sustainability-linked bond recently. How does it fit in that roadmap? Is it part of the roadmap? Is it something different? How does it fit in the total picture?
So it was something I can't say we thought about it in advance when we were doing the roadmap. So the roadmap is really, like I said, a deployment roadmap. But the sustainability-linked bond, I think it's... I was super happy when we did it with the CFO. It was actually the initiative from the CFO, right, more than from me, because it shows that we put money on the table of our ambition. And I think that's, for me, back to what I was saying earlier, in terms of credibility, we are literally telling the streets, if we don't reach our ambition, our 2030 ambition, it's going to cost us money. And it's going to cost us millions. It's not going to cost us small money. So when we agreed to do that with the CFO, for me, it was absolutely key because it gives a strong incentive. And at the end of the day, to drive my roadmap, I'm going to need CapEx. So I need the CFO to be with me. I couldn't do it without her. And she needs me to reach my target because now she has money on the table for it. So it's a complete win-win. And I think, again, the only way to do true transformation, sustainable transformation of a big industry like ours is to have everybody on board. If your CFO is not on board, if your CEO is not on board, then don't do it. Don't do it, because then you are doing a PR exercise.
Very good. Very good. Overall, what was the reaction of the key stakeholders of LafargeHolcim? So both clients, shareholders, staff. Can you say more about that?
So I will start internally. Internally, it's been overwhelming. It's been incredible. I think it was like we are giving a new purpose to the company, and we had so many positive feedback. We've just done a review of about 40 country strategies, and everybody had several slides explaining to me how they were going to do it already. Like just a few months later, it was incredible. I had a call this morning with India. They asked me to talk to their board. We already had a meeting on their board on sustainability, and they want me to regularly talk to their board to discuss the progress on sustainability. So, and that's actually half internal, half external, because the board is external. But just to say, it's been incredible internally. Externally has been excellent as well. We've had excellent press coverage. We were in the Financial Times and Reuters, Bloomberg, etc. Investors have been fully on board. I've talked myself to I don't know how many, in fact. And but what was interesting is, for example, when I had the interview with a Bloomberg journalist, he had an environmentalist PhD next to him. So it was not a blah blah interview. It was clearly how you're going to do it. And the guy grilled me, really, which was good, by the way, because I could answer all the questions, which that's where the engineer's background helps. But I think what I've been observing, the thing I was the most scared of, and I started the discussion with that, was about greenwashing. I was absolutely scared of anyone looking at what we said and say, this is not credible, this is greenwashing. We did not get a single feedback going that way, not one. And that's, for me, is great. But again, it's thanks to SBTi, because it was really the driving. So overall, everybody now, you mentioned clients. If you think about it, today, roughly 40% of our cement goes to infrastructure, and about 60% goes to private clients. Now, infrastructure, if you look at all the stimuli, post-COVID stimuli, Green Deal, etc., what you see is that there will be a lot of infrastructure development, but also more and more they are looking at having a CO2 requirement on the stimuli. So the pledge is completely going that way. It really shows that should be a marketing premium for us. And if I look at our other clients, our private clients, companies like Bouygues or Skanska, etc., our big clients who have announced some reduction of CO2 targets as well, they have to work on what we call their scope 3, right? So scope 1 is own operation, scope 2 is energy, and scope 3 is your supply chain. Okay. So when they make a commitment to reduce their scope 3, they can only do it if I reduce my CO2, because my scope 1 is their scope 3. And so I see all of that as, they took it as very positive, because they're in the same journey as us. So they need us to reduce to be able to do their own targets. Yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Can you tell us more practically who drove that initiative? What was the trigger of the initiative? Which process was followed? Or I don't know whether we can speak about the process, but if you want to make it a bit more tangible for people who are thinking about how could I start? So who was involved? What was the process? How did you go about it?
So the first point is, as I said, is really having CSO at the executive committee. I don't think you could do a serious work without that. I don't think I would have had the power in hands to do it. So that was absolutely key. The other thing that was key was the timing. And we are a little bit before COVID here, so COVID was not yet attracting all our attention. But, you know, we had Greta Thunberg, we had all the big announcements from the big investors, institutions already sending some super strong messages. It was clear that we had to do something, and something that was more than just a little step change. So that's the challenge that the CEO gave me when he named me. And very, very early, I told him, let's go for the pledge. So that was, first was to get alignment on the fact that we could study it. I'm not saying do it, study it to start with. Then the next one is I got about 100 experts from all around the world, people from innovation, from process, from the countries, from marketing, sales, you name it. We had a huge team who were super motivated because they could see that was going to be, you know, something huge they were working on. But it was very important, first of all, to, you know, have a very strong operational background. And anything that comes from corporate, if you don't get the buy-in from the operation, if you don't speak their language, if you don't sell it to them, it's not going to work. It's going to remain to some beautiful slides and that's it. So my team and I did a very big work of aligning. So when I talk about roadmap, we have roadmap at region level, country level, with the buy-in of the country management teams. And so that took a long time. And it was really the idea of convincing everybody was a great idea, everybody that it was a great idea, and that what we had was solid. We did a lot of work with validating our numbers with finance in terms of capex needs, etc. So the day I presented it for the first time at the executive committee, all this work was already done. So all these, my peers went back to their own team to say, what do you think? And because I had already worked on that team, they all got positive feedback. So I won't say I got the approval on the first go. That would have been a bit ambitious. Of course, there was a bit of challenge and so on. Then we went to the board, presenting it to the board, and the board was aligned. But I think once you have the executive committee aligned and you are showing the model that you worked on, which is credible with data and facts, etc., then it's getting, between brackets, easy to get a board approval. And then the third part of it was the communication, because I think we spent almost as much time working on how to make the pledge than how to communicate it. Because again, if you don't want to be accused of greenwashing, if you want people to take you seriously, the communication part is key. And that's why we decided relatively early, when we saw that we were moving towards approval, that we would announce it during the New York Climate Week. And it was actually announced by Alok Sharma, who is the president of COP26, during his opening speech of the Climate Week, New York Climate Week. And our CEO, Jan Jenisch, was part of the Net Zero Roundtable, the first Net Zero Roundtable of the New York Climate Week. So the communication part was almost as important as the work on the pledge itself.
Very interesting. Very interesting. As you know, at GUBERNA members are primarily board members. And of course, they're very interested to know how the boards should get involved and the like. So can you say more maybe first on, you said it, a few words on it already, how the board was involved in defining the roadmap or in approving the roadmap and later on in monitoring the roadmap? Can you say more about that?
So I think I need to go back 3 years back, so way before the pledge, when it was decided to create a HSSC, which is Health and Safety and Sustainability Committee of the board. So we have a full committee, like audit committee. I mean, I was going to say independent, I don't know if it's a word, but a committee only for sustainability, health and safety. And I think it was very important in this entire process because, first of all, the nomination of the CSO or creating that CSO position a bit more than a year ago involved the HSSC. It was kind of, I'm not sure it would have happened without the HSSC approving this position because, as you know, the board are approving executive committee positions. So creating that position was the first step. And then it allows me to have a good exchange. So usually those HSSC last about 1 hour and a half at each board meeting. I mean, each board, not meeting, but the week of the board meeting. And then the president of this HSSC then goes to the board and report to them. So I meet them about every 2 months for 1 hour and a half. I also have the president of the HSSC on the phone on a regular basis. That's very, very powerful. But I also do present to the full board twice a year. So the way we did it is, as soon as I took my job and I told my boss, I want to do the pledge, end of 2019, I came up with our 10 priorities for 2020, and that was one of them. So regularly I would update the HSSC with the progress, but having the HSSC, having that time, because the problem in a board, as you know, is you don't have time. There's so many topics, and to give enough time to sustainability, it's almost impossible. Even if you try hard, there will, especially if you're in COVID time, there will be so many economic disturbance, that it will never work. But once you have a committee, then you solve the problem. You really give enough time for it.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And so it is that committee which will be monitoring the progress of the roadmap and the next iterations of the program. Is that the idea? Yeah, yes, exactly. So I'm right now working on a KPI dashboard, because of course, in sustainability, you have what we call the lagging KPI, which we present every year, CO2 per ton of cementitious, blah, blah, blah. But I'm also creating an implementation KPI dashboard, which is the leading ones, which is, if I don't spend the CapEx this year, I'm not going to reduce my CO2 in 2 years, kind of. Yeah. So I'm working on that dashboard. It's not finalized yet, but it will be finalized in Q1. And that will be, we will agree together on yearly targets on the both lagging and leading KPIs. And in that committee, if I can spend some more time on that, the committee is composed of board members, or do you also have specialists on sustainability or outside advisors on sustainability? How does it work? No, so the committee itself is nominated board members, and we just nominated one in the last AGM, which was in May, who is a university professor specialized in sustainable construction. So that's very helpful, and he's part of the committee. We also have external advisory panel, but that's us, sustainability. And once a year, we get this external advisory panel to meet with the HSSC. Where they give their opinion on where we are. So I had a discussion with them on the strategy, because we are talking a lot about CO2, but we covered the full strategy, including circular economy, water, social, dust, environment, etc. So it's way more than just the CO2, even though the CO2 is what everyone talks about. So we have that advisory panel with a good selection of people from different regional backgrounds, and different specialty to cover all the pillars. Very good, very good. Well, can you share with us what were the main challenges, the main difficulties that you were confronted with when going for the roadmap? And we'll discuss what you expect for the future as the main challenges and difficulties. But first, to get to a roadmap, what were the main challenges and difficulties? And in particular, because I know that that is something that often people are wondering, is how does the business actually react? And the business who has to generate a P&L, keep clients satisfied and the like. So can you say more about that? So I think one of the first difficulty was to just do it, because as we were the first one in the sector to do something like that, a lot of companies are a little bit uncomfortable to be the first movers. For the reason you just mentioned, how is the market going to react? How is everybody going to react? So that was the main difficulty. So the way I worked with it is I happened to be on the same floor than my boss and the CEO. And I don't think there was a single week where I wouldn't drop the word pledge in his office somehow, So just, it's a bit the COE method, if you say a word enough, people at the end will get used to it. And same for the EXCO. I did a lot of internal lobbying, but it was more to get this comfortable factor that we could do it. And then the other one was convince the board, I would love to say we do that only because we want to save the planet, because we are brilliant people, we are so good. But you also have to answer the question, and the question was outside pleasing the investors. And what I mean by pleasing the investors is with all this movement that we see in investors now,
you know, when you see the announcement made by big institutions like BlackRock, etc., on sustainability, are we doing it for that, or is there a market driver? And this is where, what I explained earlier with the Scope 3, that's where I made this analysis of what was the big move of the market. And because the beauty of our roadmap in the next 10 years is that the cost is not going to change. Everything we do, and that was one of the challenges that the CEO gave me from the start, is any CapEx you are going to ask me, I'm going to put an ROI, which is our normal group ROI, which is maximum 5 years. And a lot of our projects is actually less than that. It's more in the 3-4 years or even 2 years in certain regions, like Europe, for example, where you have other incentives. So basically what he said was, if you can't get this ROI, then we have a big problem. So, I mean, so we managed to reach that, which, so I didn't need to hit the other, find a plan B on how to convince him to still do it when the ROI was not there. So the cost of our product is not going to be impacted, but the price premium that we certainly will get, even though it's not happening yet. If you talk to cement specialists, they will all tell you that if low carbon cement doesn't find clients, because today we are still a majority of what we sell when you talk to a purchasing guy who is just looking at price. But because of the commitment companies are making, because of the Green Deal, because of this and that, I'm absolutely sure it's going to change. I'm completely convinced, and I managed to convince the board and the ExCo of that. So basically what we decided to do in the same time that we did the pledge was deploy our product. So we now have a global brand of concrete low carbon, which we have deployed in, I don't know, maybe 20 countries so far. We are still deploying. I mean, one of the discussions I had with India was actually about this deployment over there. So we are ready. And really the idea is back to what I was saying, we're not incentivized by volume, we're incentivized by performance. So I don't want to sell a lot of my low carbon, I want to sell it at the right price. And because I don't want to jeopardize that image of low carbon product. And when you look at all the big trends, I mean, it's not just a gut conviction. One is it's observing all of that. I'm sure we will get soon a premium, and we are starting to get it in Europe, in Switzerland and in Germany. We actually would start getting some good premium pricing on a product that costs the same. So once I managed to convince them that it was also good financially, then there was no reason to stop it after that.
Excellent. And what are the challenges and difficulties that you're expecting? Because everything has been moving quite well so far, relatively. So what are the challenges that you see, the difficulties that you are anticipating going forward?
No, I think getting the roadmap, because at the end you still need to spend the capex. And for example, last year where cash preservation, you know, we had our big program, health, cost, and cash. And cash was a big thing. So last year we reduced drastically our capex spend. Hopefully this year we will go back to a more standardized kind of capex spend than last year. So of course, convincing not to be delayed because of capex spend will be my biggest challenge. And this is where the sustainability link bond is so important, because that's how I will convince, because now the CFO is on my side and she's the one who has the key of the capex. So that's why definitely, I mean, at the end, when you give contradictory objectives to people, that's where it becomes complicated. Or if you give them a cash objective in the same time than capex spend objective to do sustainability, then it starts creating friction. So it's really working on how we will prioritize the CO2 capex. Okay. That will be important, and it's not huge amounts. Between now and 2030 is actually it's not that big. So it's more a question of making sure people do it. It's back to the governance. How do you make sure that people do the actions they need to do? And it's back to the governance, having a dashboard with lead indicators, etc.
Which is a very good transition to my last question, actually. Again, back to GUBERNA members who are at boards. What could you give them as advice so that they get used, they acquaint themselves with the topic of sustainability, of what it can mean in a company, in a commercial environment or non-commercial environment, whatever. But how could they acquire the knowledge, the skills to be better board members from a sustainability point of view?
So, I'm not a sustainability person by trade, and I haven't studied anything on sustainability. So, so I can't say I have a huge knowledge. I have experts around me. I think what is more important than anything else is to truly want to do it. If you are absolutely passionate, when Jan asked me if I was interested by the position, my first question to him was, Jan, if I do that, it's because I truly want to save the planet. And if I make LafargeHolcim looks good, it will be a collateral effect. If you are not with that vision, then it's better you don't give me the job, because if you only expect me to do, belly dancing in front of whatever, then it's not going to work. And so if you are not truly believing in it, it's going to be difficult. And I think that's would be for me. Then once you really want to change things, then it's easy, because what I did when I took the job, again, considering I have no knowledge, is talk to people who know. Within the companies, there's a lot of people within our own company, and I'm sure board members can bring experts to discuss with them. I wanted to do a training actually with our board members on what it means for us, but I want to do it in presence, so it's going to be delayed until we can meet again, of course. But it's also explaining, going with a positive attitude that it's possible to do it. And I think the good old ways that we have always done it that way is too risky, etc. If you go with that attitude, it will not work. So I think it's more, if you understand well the business, and you should if you're a board member, hopefully, and you are absolutely determined to make it happen, then frankly, it's not that complicated. It's more a will thing than anything else. And for the rest, the other thing I did is I spent a fair bit of time looking at other companies' websites, not from our sectors, from the leaders, the one, I will just give you one name. Unilever is well recognized to be a leading company when it comes to sustainability. So I went to look at all the leading companies, see what they were doing, and inspire myself. And I think this is much more important than truly understanding sustainability and doing a PhD in sustainability. I don't think you need that. You really need to want to do it, see what others are doing, and talk to some few experts to understand your challenges.
Super. Thank you very much for that advice. Thank you very much for your time, Magali. That was a real pleasure, and really a great way to start the year to discuss about this so important topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yves. Thank you for this opportunity. I was so frustrated last time for missing the panel, so I'm really happy I could still express myself via this way. Thank you.
Thank you.